Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. I'm Bill Schindler, and joining us is one of the most recognizable voices and faces in sports broadcasting today. He's called World Series, Super Bowls, even starred some commercials, and now he's joining us here tonight. That's Joe Buck of Fox Sports. Joe, it's an honor to have you. How's it going?
It's going well, Bill. It's beginning of the summer, or at least we're getting toward that, and kind of a hectic summer coming up with all the things you talked about, baseball and adding golf and doing the U.S. Open and trying to figure out what the heck I'm going to do with that sport. And I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun. And, my gosh, before you know it, NFL preseason, it's all kind of running together. That's when it's at its best.
It is fun stuff, though. And let's start, though, here, Joe, with what's going on in Atlanta. The Braves, they've got actually off to a better start than most expected. It was a busy offseason for them. They shipped out the Upton brothers and many others. Nick Markakis brought in, new GM and John Hart. They're not in an easy division with the Nationals. The Nationals made some huge additions. What do you see for the Braves this year? Do they exceed people's expectations?
I think it's going to be hard. I think the one thing you have to remember in that sport is that by the end of a full 162 games, there aren't any flukes. You know, I mean, if that team outperforms expectations, then, you know, it's going to be one of the great managing jobs. It's going to be one of a season filled with guys doing things that nobody expected. I think what you mentioned in the question is the bigger part of it, and that's the division. You know, all these divisions, they're cyclical with who's on top, which ones are the strong ones across baseball. You know, even the AL East that seems to dominate year after year after year is watered down this year and isn't as imposing as it's been in years past. So to me, the big thing for Atlanta is they seem to have pared down and looking toward that new stadium and having everything ramped up by the time that comes to fruition is the division. You know, I think Washington, you know, it's not news to say that they're just stocked with pitching. Their rotation is fantastic. Their lineup is good and versatile. And the Mets are better. The Marlins are, I think, really well put together. It's a tough division. Philadelphia is the only team that you look at and say, well, if there's somebody that needs more help than we do as the Atlanta Braves, it'd be Philadelphia. They have a long way to go. And I think these organizations have their plans. And the plan there is obviously to start it over and rebuild, because what they had before, while it was good over 162 games and they got to the postseason, they weren't good enough to win it all, and they proved that year after year.
Now, change is certainly a constant, and as you were talking about there, I mean, the Phillies now at the bottom of the division. And another change, after so many years, we see a new commissioner in Rob Manfred. New directions from him. He's dropped some hints on Pete Rose. Do we finally see a reinstatement of Pete?
I think we will. You know, I've been asked it a lot, and my point on this is I think we would all agree that eventually, whether it's in 2015 or 2018 or 2029, he will be reinstated. And the minute he's reinstated, then to me the process ramps up, and eventually, if he's a part of the game and you look at what he has contributed to the game, outside of the issues he had in the gambling and the Reds and being the manager and putting down money on his team, and then certain nights not putting down money on his team, which was a telltale sign to the gambling world that even the manager didn't believe in the Reds that night. I mean, it was a big deal what he did, and then denial, and then everything that went into him eventually coming around in his book, admitting that he did bet on baseball. I think we all believe that eventually he'll be reinstated. And if he's reinstated, he'll go into the Hall of Fame. And if he's going to go into the Hall of Fame, then, in my opinion, do it while the guy's alive. He's in his mid-70s. I just read where Fox, my network, has hired him to be a guest analyst on baseball. And, you know, let him enjoy going into the Hall of Fame. I think he's paid his price. I think he does show remorse, and I think he's been humbled. And if that's the objective of any punishment and learning a lesson, I think that's happened. and it's time for him to come back to the game because I think enough people want it. And with the All-Star game being in Cincinnati this year, it would make a heck of a lot of sense for something to happen around the All-Star game.
Well, that could be one big story this year, but when we get to October, Joe, and we look back, what are we going to say is the biggest story in baseball this year? What do you think it would be?
I think maybe parity gets back into it again. I think you look at the different divisions, look at what Kansas City and the start they're off to and how they've really rebuilt. If you want to go back to the beginning question about Atlanta, look at what Kansas City's done. And there are ties there with those two organizations. I'm impressed. I continue to be impressed. I was there in the World Series last year. I thought Ned Yost, another tie-in with Atlanta, did a brilliant job of getting that team ready. But I think the bigger overall story is going to be kind of a changing of the postseason picture. I think the Cubs are getting better. I don't know if they're ready for this year, but they're now entering a window time where they're going to be expected to win, and that hasn't been the case for the last few years. They haven't even been on our Fox Saturday schedule for the main game for the last couple of years, and baseball needs the Cubs to be good. So here come the Cubs. Seattle's better. As I said, Kansas City's better. There's some of the teams that we haven't talked about. The Marlins, the Mets are better. The Yankees are down. The Red Sox are better. They were a last-place club last year. So I think you just see an overall move where, like we have in the NFL, you just can't count on the same handful of teams to be in the postseason year after year. And to me, that's a really good position for baseball to be in.
We're talking to Joe Buck of Fox Sports here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. I'm Bill Schindler, and you bring up parity, Joe. Well, how about this? You're a Midwest guy. Who's the best in Missouri when you bring up Kansas City? And then you've got the Cardinals there, too.
Yeah, those are two really good teams. I think the more dynamic team right now is probably Kansas City because of what they can do to you out of the bullpen and young starters like Ventura. Their lineup, I think, has been held together well, and they're in their window right now. The difference is the Cardinals have had this sustained success, and I know from talking to other GMs and being around other teams, seeing what the Cardinals have been able to do draft-wise, not getting sucked into really bad contracts for players who were starting to crest and then go on the backside of success, and I'm thinking obviously of Pujols, that had they not had the Angels come along and sign Albert to that big deal, man, I think that contract that they had offered him would have been crippling. And so they don't pay him the money. They turn that money into deals, short-term deal for Beltran. They draft Waka. They sign Molina. At the time, they signed Alan Craig. They turned Craig into John Lackey. Just a series of moves that have blended this team with the young and old. They have more guys on the way. They're in a good position with their roster. I think the answer to your question is the better organization is St. Louis. Maybe the better, more dynamic team right now is Kansas City.
When you talk about organizations and you talk about dynasties, we've kind of seen in basketball a sort of silent dynasty, Joe, in the San Antonio Spurs. They don't get talked about or get much credit, at least in the national conversation. You brought up the Cardinals in that. Do you think we've got the same thing going in baseball, not only with the Cardinals, but how about with the San Francisco Giants?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the guy on the field in the dugout, and that's Bruce Bochy. I've been there for all three of the Giants' World Championships, and the constant, while some of the names have changed, I mean, there's some guys that have been there, like Lincecum. Posey came along as a kid, but Aubrey Huff and Cody Ross, and then those guys gave way to the next group, and then those guys gave way to Sandoval and others. Sandoval, a big part of it throughout the years. Now he's in Boston. But the constant is Bochy, and what I've been amazed by and blown away with is his ability to manage a bullpen and his ability to match up and really have the right guy ready for the right spot. And I'm not talking about in a couple of games. I'm talking about in 3 years' worth of postseason baseball. I think he's a Hall of Fame manager. I think what they've done with 3 championships in a 5-year span in this day and age with what we talked about with the parity is incredible. So it's this just droning kind of hum of success. And, it's been every other year, but for the Giants, they've done it with a changing cast. And that's the only way you can do it. So that's the GM Sabian, the manager Bochy, and they're just they're a healthy organization. It's got a great ballpark and rabid fans that come in there and make it a really fun experience to watch a game.
I always like to ask this question to folks who are in the game and have been in the game for years. If you could change one rule currently in baseball, what would it be?
I don't know if it would be a rule, but maybe it is. I think if you look at the rule book and you look at the strike zone, at the beginning of this off season, one of the big topics of conversation was pace of game, and they've shaved 8 minutes or so off the game, whatever that number is, and then it's very early. So who knows how that's going to go during the course of the year. But to me, the way to speed up this game, the way to make the game more exciting and faster paced, and I think everybody's looking for that. It's not just time of game. I think it's the pace of play in baseball and the action is make umpires call a bigger strike zone. Make them call the rule book strike zone. At the beginning of this offseason, they talked about making the strike zone smaller. That, to me, is the opposite of where they should go. Make it bigger. Make guys go up there ready to swing. They're not always up there looking for the perfect pitch. It takes a load off pitchers. I think it would have the opposite effect. People think that would slow down offense. I think it would speed it up, and we would have pace of play that's more enjoyable, and I think would solve a lot of their problems with how they want to change this game and make it more appealing by making it faster pace.
We're here with Joe Bucks of Fox Sports. And, Joe, finally, you've called some of the biggest moments in sports. We mentioned Super Bowls, World Series, and much more. In my mind, the McGwire home run streak comes, just right to the top. The Red Sox finally winning World Series after their drought. There were many others. What stands out to you as your favorite moment in memory?
Well, now that, I've been around this for 20 years, and I've done baseball at Fox for just under 20 years, it's hard to overlook the first one. It's hard to overlook being 27 and calling a World Series and being at Yankee Stadium, the old Yankee Stadium, and proclaiming the Yankees the champions of baseball. That's something I never expected to do in my lifetime. There are a lot of moments after that. Just to be able, it's such a privilege to sit there, and it's just so fun to call the Red Sox winning the first World Series since 1918 when they did it in '04, or like you said, the McGwire home run chase. Even as more knowledgeable as we are these days with what was going on, not just with Mark, but in the game with performance-enhancing drugs, it doesn't take away from the fun of that year and the memories I had of calling that in one booth while my dad called it in the other, or the Giants winning the Super Bowl and beating that undefeated Patriots team in that fourth quarter that was, you can't say as thrilling as we've ever had in the Super Bowl because of what just happened this past Super Bowl, but pretty darn close, and having your heart feel like it's going to jump out of your chest because you're so excited, not nervous, but it's a high wire act. And, I'm at least knowledgeable and smart enough and been around it long enough by watching my dad to know that, if I get hit by a bus going into the stadium, they're still going to play the game. And so I've been lucky as heck to be in those spots. And those memories are memories I'll keep with me forever.
Well, we've enjoyed sharing them with you, Joe, and I know this has been an honor for me, and I've enjoyed talking with you. And have fun this season.
Bill, I appreciate it. Good luck to you. Thanks.
All right, thanks. That's Joe Buck of Fox Sports here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.